Taoiseach, scoliosis is a debilitating and painful condition where a person's spine twists and curves. It can cause the rib cage to press against the lungs and internal organs, making it increasingly difficult to breathe. It's especially tough on young children. Where a child doesn't get the surgeries that they need on time, the consequences are devastating. The longer they wait, the more complex procedures they will eventually need, and without timely care, children end up in wheelchairs. Some children wait so long that they become inoperable. They run out of time. Too many children and their parents face this agonising wait. The suffering and the mental distress is just unimaginable. Taoiseach, in 2017, you promised that by the end of that year, no child would wait longer than 4 months for scoliosis surgery. That was 7 years ago, and that promise has been broken again and again. And just so as we are clear, the 4-month target was agreed between you as Minister for Health and the HSE based on international best practice. That promise you made was broken. You failed to build the capacity needed here, and in 2019 you ended the scheme through which children could travel abroad to have their operations faster. Last night, my colleague David Cullinan and I met again with parents of children with scoliosis and spina bifida, and they are very angry, they're hurt, and they feel completely betrayed. They asked me to relay their words to you directly. They said, "I want to tell Simon Harris that government has actively, consistently and comprehensively failed our children. Tell him that we as parents did all the right things, everything we could do, and yet our children are subjected to serious and ongoing harm." Taoiseach, you met with these families back in 2016. Many of the same children are still in the system today, experiencing delays to the treatments they need so badly, and parents live every day with the fear of their child becoming inoperable. They say a lot of parents are kept in the dark by Children's Health Ireland. They see hard-working consultants under huge pressure and without the resources they need. Parents suspect and fear that many more children may have run out of time and become inoperable. So they want government to fund a second opinion for their children, independent of CHI. You see, their trust has been shattered by all the empty promises. Níl ein gá le gealtanas full of the páistí le scoliosis agus spina bifida. An rud atá wuhu ná nósanna imachtaí leis anish. Taoiseach, yesterday you restated a promise to children with scoliosis and spina bifida. But these children don't need any more promises. They need their operations. You say that every resource possible will be provided, and to quote you, to make sure no child finds themselves waiting in pain and agony. But these children are waiting in pain and agony today. And they heard this promise from you 7 long years ago. So I have 3 questions, Taoiseach. Firstly, are you once again promising that children will not wait more than 4 months for spinal surgeries? Secondly, are you reinstating the scheme for children who can travel abroad to get their operations? And thirdly, will government fund that second independent opinion, independent from CHI, that parents are now demanding for their children?
Thank you. Taoiseach, please.
Well, Gurmagad, Deputy McDonald, and thank you very much for raising what is an extraordinarily important, stressful and worrying issue for many families in Ireland. As you rightly say, many families that I've met, many families that I know, and many children whose faces and names I still remember. Nobody wants to see, not you, not me, nobody on this side of the House, nobody on that side of the House, wants to see any child wait in pain. On that, we can all absolutely agree. When I was Minister for Health, you are absolutely correct that I did place a real focus on this issue. And it was said to me by the then Director General of the HSE that they would put a plan in place to make sure that no child waited longer than 4 months. And that plan originated, as you correctly say, from clinical advice, and I believe similar clinical advice exists within the NHS. That was the clinical advice then, and it is the clinical advice now. Of course, there can, from time to time, be complexities, as all of us know, in relation to individual cases and multiple medical conditions and how they interact. But having said that, that's where the 4 months came from. What I definitely know is by placing that focus on scoliosis, we saw a very, very, very significant reduction in the number of children waiting over 4 months. And I think if we're going to start this Leaders' Questions engaging in good faith, I think you'll acknowledge that when you look at the figures, that after I gave that commitment, the progress that was made in a short period of time in very significantly reducing the number of children waiting over 4 months, it was real, was felt, there were weekly reports produced. The COVID pandemic happened, waiting times worsened, and waiting times worsened for all procedures, including scoliosis. My colleague, the Minister for Health, has been putting a real focus on this issue, continuing that work, and indeed trying to re-engage and refresh on it, including with new clinical leadership. I very much welcome the fact that he's appointed Mr. David Moore, a consultant surgeon in this area, to be a clinical lead, which I think is something that should be welcomed by all of us, because I think that clinical expertise will make a real difference. We have seen a very significant increase again in the number of spinal procedures now carried out. So, for example, in 2022, 509 spinal procedures were carried out. This compares to 380 in 2019. It represents a 34% increase in the number of procedures and a 22% increase for the year 2023. We now have the Paediatric Spinal Surgery Management Unit in place, and so far this year, 2024, we've seen over 120 spinal procedures take place. So yes, the government remains absolutely committed, as I know everyone in this House does, to doing everything we humanly can to assist children with wait times and to assist their parents who go through such a stressful and worrying time as well. You've asked me 3 questions, so let me endeavour to answer them. As I've said in relation to the first one, the 4 months remains the clinical advice and clinical target, and therefore that's what government here and governments around the world must work towards. Secondly, yes, my understanding is Mr. Moore, the consultant surgeon, is now looking at the issue you've raised in relation to treatment abroad options, and I think that's important that that's considered, and I welcome the fact that you, on behalf of parents, I think make that suggestion here today. And thirdly, in relation to the idea of an independent opinion, that's something I will engage with the Minister and with the HSE on, because it sounds like it's a suggestion made in good faith. So please know this, Deputy, this is an issue which will continue to receive extraordinary levels of care, investment and attention from government. I know also that the Minister for Health is convening a dedicated paediatric spinal task force with an independent chair. I know the idea of an independent chair was seen as essential by many of the advocacy groups. That independent chair is Mark Connaughton, who is a senior counsel, and the chair is now meeting with stakeholders and with patient groups and finalising the terms of reference, which I think is another important step forward as well.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
So, Taoiseach, you say that nobody wants to see children in agony and pain, but you see, that is what we see. That's exactly what we see. I spoke with one mother last night whose child is now no longer a child. They're now 19 and they're inoperable. Why are they inoperable? They are inoperable because they waited and they waited and they waited. And she said directly, they've followed all the right protocols, all of the care paths, and for what? And words and rhetoric are of no value to them. The only good faith actually that matters on this subject is the good faith of government. That's the issue. The issue here is that we have, 4,000 children awaiting their first consultation. That's the length of the list. We have 270 children on the surgery waiting list, 78 of whom have waited and waited far longer than 4 months. And here's perhaps the worst feature of all. The most complex, the most desperate of cases, in many cases, have the longest wait. And they are now officially, these families, these children, these young adults, these parents are in a state of absolute panic.
Thank you,
so I want a concrete commitment from you that you will not simply engage but deliver on the independent opinion, deliver on the travel abroad, but more broadly than that, Taoiseach,
Please, Deputy, now.
the parents want to know that you are now Taoiseach, that you will finally honour a promise made many, many years ago.
Hear, 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 hear.
Well, thanks very much, Deputy McDonald. So firstly, I answered your 3 questions. I answered them sequentially, I answered them clearly, and I will continue to engage with you on the 3 answers that I gave you. Secondly, I think it's a little dismissive to suggest words and rhetoric when 120 procedures this year is not rhetoric, is not words. When massive levels of investment in theatres, when hiring more nurses, when hiring more doctors, they're not words, they're real actions. I know it suits you to suggest these are just words and rhetoric, but these are real things that we're doing to make a real difference, and there's no monopoly on concern. Even in the last fortnight, the Minister for Health has received requests from Mr Moore, the new clinical lead, in relation to further additional staff, further additional posts, and has provided the green light. So I'll engage with you in good faith on these exchanges, but it's not words, it's not rhetoric, it's real solid action that we're taking to address an extraordinarily difficult thing, and you can shake your head if you wish, but that's what it is. And the final thing I'd say is I hope when you meet these families, and I hope when you engage with them, and I hope when you position yourself as having all of the solutions to all of the issues, I hope you have the good grace to tell them that when you had an opportunity to put an alternative health budget to this House, you provided £500 million less to the health service than this government provided. And how do you square that circle in terms of extra staff, extra investment, extra... It's true, it's in your alternative budget. Sinn Féin.ie.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Please. Leaders' questions, not anybody else.